We're going to start off with a word of prayer here and thank the Lord for another Sabbath day that He's given us to be able to worship Him in a day that is in a way that is pleasing unto Him. So we do this not because of He needs to hear it, but more that we need to express our joy and love for Him. And so we're very thankful for the Lord and all the wonderful things He's done. Stan gave me a pretty good idea what he wants to talk about this morning. I think it should be a lot of fun for us. So it's good that we're recording it because there will be some people that will miss it, but I'm sure that we will enjoy it later. Anyway, let's bow our heads and go into word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we want to ask that you bless us this morning, that you sanctify your people, that you keep us consecrated and holy unto you, for we know that we are your people, Lord. And it is not a very common thing or a very popular thing to be as faithful to the true word of God, to the true gospel, and to follow the doctrines. For we know that those things are cutting out of vogue because of the fact that more people want to be entertained and not learn and be established in your word. But we know that it sustains us, Lord. It is the bread of life, and it gives us hope and faith for a day where Christ will come and He will reward those that have been faithful. We commit ourselves in prayer, Lord, and ask that you will bless and sanctify all the things that we try to do in your holy name. And ask that you forgive us if we have fallen short in anything, for we know that we are a flawed people serving a perfect God. And we want to just commit ourselves in prayer and ask this in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Yeah, it looks like a bad picture, and it is. Okay, so the topic today is Israel in perspective of a trip that Melody and I made 11 years ago. And there's a lot to be learned from it. So it isn't going to be selfie pictures by any stretch. You're going to learn an awful lot about what Israel is like and things you might not have realized about what that teaches us about the Bible. And so I've got a bunch of pictures here, some better than others. This is the first one, and yeah, it's not a good picture. I had two cameras. One was a cell phone 11 years ago. Cell phone cameras weren't as good as they are now. And I had a much better camera for zoom shots. And so some of the pictures will definitely be better than the others. And so Israel, the flight there, this is at the airport in Israel. It is a little more than a 10-hour flight if you take a direct flight. And we did. And when you get there, you are 8 hours out of your time zone. And so the very first thing you experience is 3 days of being in a cloudy daze of jet lag. And I remember the morning of the third day when I woke up and all of a sudden everything cleared, and it was just wonderful to be a living, breathing, normal person again. And so that adjustment was a tough one going in that direction. Coming back, it wasn't so bad. I'm not sure why there was such a big difference. But going to Israel was definitely a struggle for both of us. And Melody, the jet lag even lasted a day longer for her. So anyway, but the first thing you do when you get to the airport there is you say, we're not in Kansas anymore, because in other countries, at least you see a Roman alphabet and you recognize the characters. Here, it's not even that much. So what we were on was we were on a 12-day tour with a person whose name I did write down here, Joel Rosenberg. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. Jewish Christian, used to live in the US. He's now done Aliyah and moved to Israel and lives there. But annually he set up these tours, and this was the center where the conference room was. And it was a group of about 250 people in this tour group. And so a really large tour group by any standard of tour group I've been in before. And this was the conference center where we met. And we had a big place, and every day for the first few days, we went on these conference sessions, which were preaching. There were people preaching on all topics, and so we did quite a few services that way at first. The first 2 days, I think, were spent in these conference centers, learning about different things, anywhere from prophecy to just general Bible topics. And it was all really very good, and notable people too. Billy Graham's daughter, Anne Graham, was one of the presenters, and other big names like that were there. And so this was really good too. We were very happy with it. The food was good, the hotels were good, everything was like that. And so once we got past these first couple days of these sessions, we started doing more exploring around the area. And so our schedule at that time would be, we would see something in the morning, we would have lunch, we would see something different in the afternoon, we would have dinner, and then there would be a sermon afterwards in the evening. And so that was kind of the normal schedule of things. And that was a good schedule. Once we got past the jet lag, those sermons in the evening on the first few days were a bit of a struggle because we couldn't hardly stay awake. We're so far out of our time zone. So this is just looking at general Israel, Jerusalem area from the hotel. I'm going to skip through some of these pictures pretty quickly because you're not going to be that interested in them. But whatever you might have thought Jerusalem might have looked like, it doesn't look like that. At least it didn't for me. I had very different ideas of what it would look like. Hotel again, looking, you should be able to see my pointer. Yes, you can. You probably can't see it right now, but way out there is going to be the Dome of the Rock Mosque. And unfortunately, I have to look up there on the screen too. Okay, now you can see it a little better. I'm zooming in. There's a little bit of a yellow dome. Where is that? Well, in there someplace. Hard to see. So you're actually, and so the Dome of the Rock Mosque is on the Temple Mount. And so when you see that, you know that you're not that far away from the Temple Mount. They had different kinds of trees and vegetation, as you might expect from what we have here.
Do you know what kind of trees those were?
No, I saw lots of things that I didn't recognize, and neither did Melody. But the hotel had lots of stuff like that, trees and things, maybe for tourists. It was just to show them the different kind of things you could see. And so this is another one of those. And again, if you could look far enough out there, right where that mouse pointer is there, you would see a golden dome. But we will get much closer and see it in the pictures. Yeah, there's one you can see better. There's that golden dome sticking up above the tree. So that's on the Temple Mount area right there. So our hotel was within sight of that. It was odd to see a flag that wasn't the American flag flying, or even the Canadian flag. More pictures around there, scooting along. Okay, traveling around. I've mentioned before that Israel has a lot of rock, and you'll just see that all the time. All of this is just rock, 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 rock. And a large part of Israel is that, and the rest of it isn't, is pretty much desert. But a lot of it is normal country. You wouldn't see anything different here. People drive on the right side of the road, as they should. And a lot of the country is just kind of normal stuff that you would see. Some of the vehicles are a little different because they're not made, they're not all North American vehicles. Some are, some aren't. Going back there, what you're seeing up here is these are places where they're growing things, and these are actually flowers that they're growing up there. They're huge sets of flowers, and so they grow quite a bit of different things there, from flowers to vegetables and foods and things like that.
That seems like it's along the road, or?
Yeah, those are along the road. Israel is a very narrow country, and you can go east to west in about an hour. The only thing that stops you from making that shorter is that it's kind of twisty-turvy and uphill and downhill. And so it's a very narrow country that way. And so roads are a bit of a problem. Most of the roads are kind of north-south roads because that's where most people travel, is north-south.
It's not very big either.
No, it's not a big country, not at all. And you can easily, well, remember Elijah. He's in Jerusalem when she threatens his life. And he's able to walk to the very bottom, the south end of Israel. And so, yeah, it's not very far. Okay, once we finished those days of the sessions, we went touring, started the touring. And this was a Christian church in, speaking of Elijah, we'll see the name later. I've forgotten the name of the hill. Did I write it down? I wrote down names that I knew I'd forget. Nope, not that one. Okay, so anyway, we'll see that name in just a moment, and you'll recognize it as a Bible name. But this was a church that was set up there. It overlooked part of typical housing in that area, Jerusalem area, Israel. different from what we're used to for sure. But that's pretty typical to build on the side of a hill like that in those kinds of buildings. Back to the church, they had done something interesting here. This is Carmel. If you remember Mount Carmel and that from the Bible. And so what they had done in building their church is they had gone out and found 12 great big stones, and they had used those as part of their building here. And the reason for that is that when Elijah was setting up to that, to bring down fire from heaven on his sacrifice, he got 12 stones, big stones together to make the altar. And so they did the same thing because they're in that same area where that happened. And so they went out and found 12 big stones. And they like to think that maybe they got one or two of the ones that he used, but who knows? Probably not. But anyway, that was kind of the theme that they had. And this is walking along in that area on Carmel, the sign for the church. Now, this is something interesting. Just driving along on the roads, you'll see these. These are, who can tell me?
Tombstones? No.
Close, yeah, they're graves. They're not just tombstones, but these are graves. Now, I don't know if these are actually being used anymore, but they could be. But these were what they did for graves very commonly. Is the land is just naturally one that kind of creates pitfalls in that rock. And so if you found a good pitfall that was already a small cave, you would just dig it out some more and make it into a place to bury somebody.
And that the old-fashioned used to do, because I remember when Jesus died, they said they remove a stone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is one that actually fits that so well, because here's a big round stone, and that's what you would cover it up with during the stinky phase. And what they would do once, Martha hates my words. Once the body is down to just bones, they would usually collect the bones together and put them in an ossuary, which is a bone box, a small thing that is just the size for bones, and store the bones that way. And then the tomb would be available for whoever died next in the family to go in. And if you were wealthy, you had a much fancier tomb than that. This is probably just a single person tomb. Later on, we'll see one that they think is possibly the one that Jesus was buried in, and it's a much more elegant one. We know that it was a rich man's tomb, and we actually went inside of there, and it would seat three. Yeah, it was big enough to fit 3 bodies in it. So everything, as I said, is stone, and so when you build stuff, you tend to build it out of stone. And this is actually Armageddon, and I only took a few pictures in this area. This is strongly attached to prophecy, but this, it's a lot of Jerusalem is hot and desert-like, and this was very typical of that. And they used stones for everything, to build stairs, to build everything at that time. And sometimes fancy finished stones like these, but very often just ordinary stones for more simple purposes. And this is a storage area for grain. And so when you had your grain harvest came in for the community, everybody would take it and put it in here. And so when you went later on to pull out grain, you would walk down this road or this path down here as far as you needed to go. If there was lots of grain in it, then you'd be able to pick up your grain up here. But if it was getting down near the bottom, you'd be down here picking up grain from the bottom. And that's how they kept their grain. And perhaps they had a cover. Nobody's really sure if they had any sort of cover on that, or maybe it was just exposed as it is. But that was a common way of storing food like that. And I took a couple pictures of that because I was completely fascinated by it. This is a picture that I'm going to skip.
Was it stairs? It wasn't an escalator, was it?
No, that was actually, remind me when I give you some pictures of Jerusalem, and you'll see what this is. It's actually Hezekiah's tunnel, or related to Hezekiah's tunnel, back when he was covering up the springs of Gihon and that stuff, if you remember that. So yeah, we'll get back to that perhaps, if I can remember. Okay, this is Galilee. Galilee is much more interesting. Galilee is an interesting area. Those Bible stories of storms coming up on Galilee, that really does happen. And we could see how that would happen so easily. when we were there, most of the time the weather was at worst a little foggy and at best nice and clear. But you'd be sitting alongside there and all of a sudden a big wave would come and just sweep in and big splash and all that sort of stuff. And you say, where did that wave come from? And that lake, although it's a large lake, just seems to have that desire to surprise people with waves.
Which time of the year were you there?
May. Yeah. And so the place that we stayed there, we were there for a couple of nights and was a really nice place. This is the pool that they had looking out on the Galilee out there. Their parking lot looking in the back. And so this was actually in a place called Tiberias. A lot of places in Israel at that time, at Jesus' time especially, were named after the head of the Romans. And so Tiberius was one of the Caesars. And so they made this nice place for him. And it was one of his favorite spots in Judea that he would come, and it was a beach place. Their idea of a beach is not the same as our idea of a beach because of all the rocks. But so this one was called Tiberias. There's two others mentioned in the Bible, Caesarea Maritime, which I'll give you some pictures from there because we were there, and Caesarea Philippi, which really is being restored right now. People left it eventually, and it's more up in the north of Israel. And so those Caesareas were Caesar, and they were named after Caesar. And so it was common to do that back at that time.
How was the weather then?
It was really good. Not any problems with weather at all. Like I said, the most we would see is haze or fog, but most of the days were clear. Oh, temperature? No, it was better than that. It was mid 80s to high 80s. Yeah, not cold. The Sea of Galilee, you can see the rocks are not really what we'd call a beach or sand. At that point, I'll go back a bit. You're looking across the Sea of Galilee. It's 8 miles across over there. What we did is, once we kind of explored this local area, we went up around north and came around north of the Sea of Galilee and crossed over to the place where Jesus had been. Remember when Jesus kicked the demons out and they went into the pigs, into that area there. And when we were there, we stopped and had some fish. You'll see some pictures later on. And then we took a boat cruise coming back this way. And that was a really good thing to do. Informative and interesting and just generally fun. And so this was part of our group. This was our, where's my pointer gone? I have a pointer, there you are. This was our tour guide here and other people who were in our bus. Now we had like 250 people and we filled up 7 buses of people. And they have wonderful tour buses there, really fancy, nice things. I'll see a picture of them later on. And so it was really a quality tour. We enjoyed every part of it. This is a site in the Nazareth area where that they're restoring. And what you see here, there's actually some better pictures. Yeah, here we are. You probably can't read that sign, but this is how they would crush olives. And olives were a big part of a lot of their lives, not just as a food, but as oil for their lamps and for all sorts of purposes. So olives were a big deal. And this was how you would do it. You would take the olives off the tree and put them in here. And then you would roll this stone around in here and crush them and crush the whole thing into a mash of olive pulp and seed pulp and oil. And then you would put them in little baskets and stacks of baskets would be stacked on top of each other. And the oil would just kind of press out because of the weight and it would just slowly go down. And so the very first oil that would come off of that is the best oil. It's the extra virgin oil. And as you wait longer and longer, it begins to come from more from the seeds and more from the shells. It's a poorer quality oil, and that was the oil you would use for burning in your lamps. But the other stuff was a food oil. And so this would be how you would do that, is running that around here, and that'd be the first stage of doing that. And then later on, you would press it, and you would just let natural weights, stones piled on top of trays of these things, and they would leak out. And there's other things, other stones in here that were used for crushing grain and stuff, things that they've found and haven't really finished doing too much with at this point. Another picture of that. One thing that they did have here that was really interesting, I'll tell you, although I don't have a picture of it, because I was too fascinated to take a picture, is they had shepherds in there. And the shepherds would, they had goats and sheep in this little tiny flock that they had. And what they did as a demonstration for us is these 4 shepherds, I think it was 4, got together and got all of the goats and all the sheep into one nice little herd. And then the shepherds stepped back just slowly, not enough to disturb the herd. And the first thing you noticed was the goats went every direction. The goats split off and headed out, but the sheep all stayed together. And the message there lines up with what you see in the Bible, is that God's people stay together and they follow the master, but the goats go off and do their own thing. So that was interesting there. This was walking around along the Sea of Galilee. There was a path that we were going along, and these are the same kind of areas where Jesus walked. This is all Jesus country around here, Nazareth and Capernaum, that area. We stopped at Capernaum. I don't think I have a picture from Capernaum. And anyway, we were walking along these paths. And one thing you always have to be careful of, and happened here, is that somebody took a bad step and broke their ankle. Didn't just twist it, they broke it. And they took that person off to the hospital to see what could be done. And the decision was that she needed to go back to the US. She couldn't be treated in Israel. And so that was the end of the tour for her. Other odd things that grow there.
Wait, what was it?
Oh, I don't know what it is. It's purple. It might be a thistle, yeah. And this is a common way you see things grown, is they're controlling the amount of sunlight, controlling the humidity by growing them in these under these cloth tarps. And under there, he's growing some kind of crop of something special. And so the Jews really have innovated an awful lot, and they really have turned Israel back, just like God said, it turned it back into a wonderful place where all sorts of things are grown, milk and honey and all that land is productive again, with the Jews having coming back. But what's kind of interesting there is in the time that the Jews were thrown out by the Romans, and until they came back, it was an uninhabitable land. Nobody wanted to live there. They couldn't make anything work there. God was keeping people out so that Israel would be able to return. And so anybody who tried to make a living there really scrabbled hard to get any kind of success in growing things, anything like that. But once Israel came back, they turned the whole story around. And now they have all sorts of international products that they sell, and they're a high-tech country and all sorts of good things.
Is that a boat in the background?
Yes, that would be, and that looks like one of the boats that we were on. I'll give you better pictures of that. But we're looking down at the Sea of Galilee here.
I had read that when they returned, they already had written down where all the streams and all the pools and all the water was.
Mm-hmm.
And they just went in there and tapped into it, and they irrigated the land.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the Arabs, either or whoever was living there, didn't know. Yeah. Or didn't even bother to. I don't know what happened there, but it was like very commonplace for them to know exactly where everything was at. Yeah,
it was their land, and so they knew. Yeah, very true. Okay, that's the picture of Galilee in the background, but these are the kind of tour buses that we traveled in, and they were very nice buses for that purpose, those great big windows. This, I told you, we went around the north end of the Galilee. Here's a picture of Stan's dinner. And we stopped into a place called Peter's Diner or something like that, named after Peter, obviously. And so the thing you had to do, and the tour had arranged this, is you had to eat this fish, which was from the Sea of Galilee.
You had to?
We were encouraged to.
Oh,
It would be out of the spirit not to eat a fish from the Sea of Galilee if you're by the Sea of Galilee. So we did all of that and at this little restaurant there, and then that's part of the boat that comes back and takes you back. And so you eat your dinner, and then you go out to the wharf where the boats are, and you get on a boat and head across the Sea of Galilee. And 8 miles across a river or a lake is a big distance, and it takes a while to get across. So it's a fair trip. Oops, too far. And so these are the kind of boats that we were on, taking us back. And they're a good-sized boat, bigger than you might think just looking at it. We needed 3 of these boats to take all of our tour group across.
And that's over what body of water?
Sea of Galilee.
Is it Fresh water or salt?
It's fresh, yeah.
I don't think I would drink it though. I mean, it's like river water, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so that was one of the other boats where some of our people were. This is a bit of our boat, and looking back at the shore just after we left. Some of the people in our tour group. 2 flags.
Oh, is that the US flag?
Yeah. Yes, you see a lot of signs have English and Arabic on them because those are the people who bring. What did that one guy say to us? He said, thank you for making Israel green. What it really means is thank you for spending your money here in Israel.
Did you flew over there?
Yeah. 10-hour flight. And okay, so this is our boat looking at one of the other boats from our group. They tried something that seemed like a good idea to them that they obviously hadn't ever tried before. They were going to have a sermon on the boat. Our boat was going to be the lead boat, and the other 2 boats were going to come up beside us. And they didn't realize that when you do that, the 2 hulls form kind of a little bit like this. And the smallest splash echoes off these things and comes up and splashes on the people. And so whenever a decent wave came along, the people would get rained on. So very quickly, the guy just barely got into his sermon, and he realized this just wasn't going to work, and they gave it up. The bow of one of the boats. And I imagine that's supposed to be a mythical sea creature of some sort.
Leviathan.
And this is part of the beach area of Sea of Galilee, not the kind of beach you would think of. This is interesting. This is commonly called the Jesus boat. What happened something like 40 or 50 years ago is the water level in the Sea of Galilee went down enough that they started finding things just like they are in Las Vegas Lake Mead, and starting finding things. And one of the things they found buried in mud was this old boat. And it is exactly the same kind of boat that Jesus' fishermen disciples would have used for fishing. And they did their best to restore it. And that's probably not easily seen in that picture, but up close you can see that it is definitely a boat and has all of the ribs and stuff in it. Yeah, that's too close to even make anything out, I think. But this is what it would have looked like. This is a model built based on what that is structured like. And so this is how they would have gone around, and these were the oars that they would have used for steering it and moving it around. Fish that they caught would have been tossed into here, and they would have worked front and back as they needed to do things. And so this Jesus boat, as it's called, is the kind of boat, but it isn't necessarily the boat that Jesus went into.
Did they say what kind of wood it was made out of?
Yeah, but I wouldn't remember that. Don't know. Another sunset picture. Oh, the food at this place was really good. And what they had that I didn't expect was a hummus bar. And so you would go to the hummus bar and you would say, I want to get some hummus. And they would say, what would you want in it? And they had like 30 different things, olives and all sorts of things you'd have put into your hummus. And so you just told them what you want to put into it, and they made you some hummus like that.
Pork chops?
No, no, none of that. On that theme, the hotels that we were at kept Sabbath. They did that. They wouldn't start a fire on the Sabbath because they're not supposed to start a fire on the Sabbath. And so what they would do, we were told, we didn't see it happening, of course, is they would light a string at the end of Friday, a long string. And in the morning, they would still be glowing because it was slowly burning down this string. And in the morning, they would pick up that ember and start a little piece of paper on fire. And then they would start the candle wicks and heat the food with candles on the Sabbath instead of electrically like they would have normally. And so they actually did that in the hotel. And so the food on the Sabbath was quite different because it wasn't like a normal breakfast mostly. It consisted more of breads and some other hot things, toppings and stuff like that. But it was a different kind of breakfast because of that. Lights on palm trees. I thought that was kind of funny. And again, part of that seawall of the Sea of Galilee. And you can see that the water level does sometimes come up here as waves just come out of nowhere and decide that they're going to charge into the inland.
Palms are so pretty.
Yeah, this was a nice place. It was. And that's a weird bird. I don't know what his story is. And this is the best beach part that they had. They cleared some stones out. They probably made some of these walls with the stones that they cleared out of there. And they probably brought in some sand, I imagine. And that's their beach. But notice this is the end of the swimming line here. So it isn't like a long Hawaiian beach that goes out for a long stretch. It goes down pretty steeply. So nonetheless, that was the best that they had in Israel. Okay, we went to another place, and they had something that was interesting. They had what they believed a cross would look like at Jesus' time. We often see it as depicted as like a 2 6x6s or something like that are put together, nice square dimensional lumber. But their reasoning is, and they have some history backing it up, is that nobody cared that much about anybody being crucified on the cross, so you wouldn't waste dimensional lumber on them, because dimensional lumber took a lot of people to hack away at it and make it nice and square and stuff like that. So it would have been truly just tree and tree, and held together with ropes, and not how we often depict it.
Well, they did mention several times, Paul would mention them a lot, the Lord hanging on a tree, and
Yeah.
he died on a tree. So yeah, you're right. It isn't like a nice flat board or nothing.
Yeah, and then you'll see a building that'll kind of emphasize that idea in just a little bit here. Now, the land, again, as I said, is rock with lots of pits in it. So there's been kind of weak areas where rain has washed it out. And so people would use these pits for different things. Sometimes they would hollow it out and make it into a place where you would stomp grapes. And so you would stomp your grapes in this little pit and take the juice out, and that's how you would do that. And stones were used for stone walls, of course. Okay, now this is indoors. This is another mill. This would have been for grains, though, not for all of us like the one that we saw before. And this one would have been driven by a donkey. See this long piece coming out here. The donkey would have been harnessed up to that, and he would have gone around and around and around and crushed the grains that were in it with this millstone here. And we see millstones mentioned in the Bible. Jesus talks about that. He says it would be better if he had a millstone tied around his neck, big heavy rock, and its purpose is to crush grain. Okay, this is a church at Capernaum, synagogue at Capernaum is maybe a better word. And notice what I was saying before. Here's some dimensional lumber here, but we're going to see another picture later on where you're going to see that just ordinary trees are used in other parts of it. And so this has been restored. It isn't entirely original. It was knocked down, but it is on the same location where there was a synagogue that would have been there back at Jesus' time, almost certainly. And so what you see that's kind of classical here is you see these columns. And I'm taking a picture from this side of the building, looking out through the columns on my side, looking at the other people over there on the columns on their side. And then this inner area here would have been where the person worked to do the presentation for teaching whatever he was teaching from the Bible. Or over here, you can kind of see a person here. You can teach there. And one thing that the Bible even talks about is all of these synagogues pointed east. So the door on the left here is pointing east. And that was done biblically for a very long time, but they say that later on they started pointing them at Jerusalem instead. And so any new synagogues that were born or created were built facing Jerusalem instead of facing east.
Were those columns considered Roman type?
That's a good question, and I don't know. They would have been influenced by Romans for sure, because there was so much Roman influence because Rome had taken over Israel. So it may well have been, but columns are something that the Greeks also had earlier, and remember Greek had conquered Israel like 300 years before Jesus' time, and so it may have come from that too. So all of those influences, and then even Solomon's temple, going further back, he has columns, but we don't know much about what they look like. So stone columns were a common enough thing for a long time. But yeah, there were lots of different influences in the style of how they were built. And we'll see some more here once we look at Caesarea Maritima. Okay, again here, that idea of using dimensional lumber in select places where you need to have dimensional lumber for structure. And then up at the roof, you just use trees and you overlay the trees with pieces of wood and then straw over top of that or something else over top of that. So building construction is typically that way, a mixture of dimensional lumber and just trees. This is a really nice place in Tel Aviv called some Baha'i temple. So not really related to the trip at all. We just happened to be on that street. This was interesting in the trip. There was what they called the Day of Service. And it was an opportunity for us to go and do something to help Israel. This group is associated with a fund group called the Joshua Fund. And they try to make the lives of people in Israel better than they are, because there's a lot of people in Israel who are very poor. And so we were split into different groups. One of the groups was to go out right near the Gaza area where often fighting is. And they asked us all to give our age and our health to make sure that we didn't get chosen to go to Gaza, because one of the requirements if you went to Gaza is you had to be able to run 1 block in 15 seconds or something like that. And the reason was, if a rocket attack came, there would be a rocket siren, and then you had 15 seconds to be elsewhere. And so they wanted only healthy people to be on that particular excursion. And for us, they picked out the people who were going to go on that excursion. And then they canceled it because they said the rocket risk was just too high in those days. They were expecting rockets to come raining down. And so they didn't want to put anybody at real risk. So anyway, this was where we did our day of service in Tel Aviv. And we were doing different things. The women were working little booths to give out soaps and things like that to the people who were poor. And all the men were commissioned to make these little roller carts that they would use to put all these groceries in that they were going to be picking up. So the men would build a little roller cart, and we don't have anything equivalent to that here, but apparently it's very popular there. It's like your airport bags with a handle on it, but it's all wire. There's no cloth to it. And so it just has kind of a wire basket at the bottom of it, and you put your stuff in the basket and then you roll it out. And so the men assembled all these things from the pieces, and the women each had a little booth, and they would give out the soaps and other things that were being given out.
How far from Jerusalem is Tel Aviv?
Well, it's almost directly west, and so it's not far.
So that's a modern city, because you never hear about that in the Bible. Did it used to be called a different name, or is it just a more recent city?
It has old stuff in it. You see lots of old things, but yeah, I don't remember seeing Tel Aviv in the Bible, and it is a much more modern city. That is where the airport is.
That's the capital, right?
No.
They moved the capital.
Yeah.
Okay.
The capital is officially Jerusalem, but the functional capital is pretty much Tel Aviv. It's the high-tech center. It's all sorts of other things. It's also a religious center, and Jerusalem is kind of the old stuff.
I thought I've seen like Tel Aviv.
Yeah, you can say it a different way, and that's just part of the characteristic of the language. We normally see Tel Aviv in English, but the V and the B, I think Spanish is the same way, are almost the same sound, and so you could say it either way.
So are those stairs going up, or what?
Yes, those were stairs. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and so you could, of course, take the easy way and park up top, but you could also walk up there if that was what you were looking to do. Okay, now this is the library. And so Melanie was all, to go and see the library. And so she went in, charging into the library once we had finished our service. And we were loading the bus, and she had to go in there and look around a little bit. And so she did that and chatted with some people who worked there and stuff like that. And it was big fun for her. And as you see what I mentioned before here, you see Hebrew, Arabic, and English. And that's very common to see that combination of languages on most signage. Okay, this is, you're not going to see from this picture. I'll go to the next one. You can sort of see these little pock marks in here. Israel has seen a lot of battles, especially in the early years, and there were people who would attack Jerusalem or other cities and come in and shoot the place up. And this is one of the places that no one has repaired. They just left it the way it was. And so you see all these little pockmarks from bullets. Somebody was probably firing at somebody in the door or through the door, and they didn't always hit their target. So that's a little bit of the culture of Israel. There are bad actors inside of the state who hate the state, and despite the state giving them wonderful jobs, wonderful lives that they could never have in any of the Arab countries around them, they still hate Israel, and it's just foolishness. And so they have the best medical care, they have all the opportunities they could ever want in Israel, but they hate it anyway.
Sounds like the United States.
Yeah, there are some people in our country who hate. Yeah, Yeah. yeah, it's a form of insanity, I really think. This was just a sign for telling us what was happening coming up, preparing us for the next tour and what would be happening. It was well organized that way. This is Galilee again. You can see one of the boats out there. A couple more of those boats out there.
That's what it looks foggy or just.
Yeah, it is a little hazy sometimes. And remember, this is 8 miles across. And that's kind of, this cliff that you see here in the back kind of fools you. You think, well, that cliff can't be as high as it really is, but it is. And so that fools your eyes into thinking that it's not as far away as it looks. But it is 8 miles. And so 8 miles above ocean or lake kinds to always be a little hazy. Traveling through the countryside again. I don't see anything notable there.
Are really green.
Yes, yeah, really true, and that's because of what the Israelites or the Jewish people have done. They've really brought life back to the desert. Before they came, I remember reading a thing about that. Most of the water bodies that they had were polluted and full of flies and bugs and stuff like that, and really uninhabitable. And the Jews have cleaned up everything and made it into a really wonderful place that you would actually want to live. Okay, here we are. This is Caesarea Maritime. It's on the Mediterranean, okay? And it was a major port at the time. It was really built up by the Romans to be one of the big ports of its time. A lot of that has fallen apart and fallen down, and they're restoring all of these things here. But it gives you a really good insight into what Roman life and even Roman life in Judea was like back in those days. Because it has some of their main forms of entertainment. This is a building here. You can just start to see the seating over here. Okay, and so this is, there's going to be 3 kinds of buildings there. There's going to be a theater, and there's going to be what was the name of the places where gladiators fought? Colosseum. And a hippodrome, and those, they had all 3 of those forms of entertainment here at this. And so what you're seeing here is the seating for the theater area, and I'll give you some better pictures of that later on. This is the hippodrome. They raced hippos. Hippo is Latin for horse. and so this is the track, what you're seeing behind here. So the hippos would come roaring down here. With almost certainly somebody in tow, and go zooming back up here. And so there's a long stretch on those parts. And so there's kind of semicircular end pieces and a long stretch or longer stretch in between them. And so the shape of that complex was different from the others in that way, that it was kind of 2 half circles with a long stretch between them. And so we actually sat down here and had a sermon and sang songs and did stuff like that. And it was quite a really remarkably good time, enjoyable. Okay, this is entering another one of the building. Again, as you can see, Israel had lots of rocks, and so rocks were used to build things. It's not entirely complete. They're still rebuilding some of the things. You'll see some more pictures like that. Okay, this is in the theater. So this is a pretty impressive place. And this was how it would have been. It's been restored to be in this. So what you're seeing here is a semicircle of seating, and then at the end of it, over on this side here, is where the theater part would be. So there'd be actors doing plays, or there'd be people teaching something or talking about something, or political discussions, who knows what. And so this is the theater part of it. And for us, we actually sat down in there and we had a short talk on something. And you can see the different groups, different bus groups took different places and sat different places.
So like those seats, they're original or they're?
Pretty much everything here is being restored. Some of it would be the original rock for things, especially in the Hippodrome. You actually saw more original rock. You can see these are pieces of columns. You were asking about columns earlier that they have found, but they don't have, in this case, they don't have the column piece for it, and they have the head piece for it. And so they didn't really know what it was, but it was a cool thing, so they put it on a stand so people could see. And so there were other buildings there. They know, but they don't know what they were because there's not enough remnants from those buildings. So that would be very much Roman style, you'd expect.
Very elaborate.
Yeah, yeah. And there are columns without headstones, and this used to be some sort of a building, possibly a temple, who knows what. And so that's how it would be built, is there would be columns all around on four sides, and then they'd put a roof on top of that. And that's the Mediterranean in the background there. Critter. This is back at the Hippodrome again.
There's a barge right in the back?
Yes, oil barge. Yeah, there's still a lot of shipping. This isn't the shipping center it used to be in Herod's time, but it is still a shipping center. This is Joel Rosenberg, who is the kind of the chief guy of this group, giving a presentation to us. If you don't know him, he's a good Christian man. He does a lot of semi-fictional books. They are kind of fictional books that are based on our time and kind of look forward into what would happen if the trends in our society go forward. So it's kind of a fiction story based on reality and expectations of where our society is going. And quite popular in people who like those books. He's done some other books that were more strictly religious and less fictional as well. Yeah, camels. And there are camel dealers there who will give you a ride on their camel for a price.
Did you take one?
No. And this is actually on, yes, I'm quite sure that this is on top of the Mount of Olives now. So we've changed location. And so the Mount of Olives in Jesus' time was a mountain with olives on it, like olive trees on it. And now it's a mountain with housing and roads and streets on it. And it's not what we would call a mountain. It's hill country. So looking from there, now this is Mount of Olives to the east of the Temple Mount. And so it's about 300 feet above the Temple Mount. And so with my long lens, I was able to take a better picture of the Dome of the Rock Mosque down there. See that somebody's doing some kind of servicing of the dome there on that service ladder. And we'll see some better pictures of these when we actually go onto the Temple Mount. But there are archways. These are archways that are put in place, built on stone, built from stones that the people found. That they said, well, this was part of an archway. We don't know really where it goes. We'll assemble it and put it up there. And so this is all reconstructed. Maybe remember that Jesus said that when he was up on the Temple Mount, he said, see all of these stones and everything, every stone is going to be knocked off of each other. And that was literally true. And so people have rebuilt the Temple Mount, but they have no idea where everything went. And some of the stones were gone anyway. And so you see a lot of that. Now, the Temple Mount this is the wall for Jerusalem, the old Jerusalem wall. And you'll see on it, well, I'll explain in a later picture. And so this is part of the wall of the city, which is on the Temple Mount. So the Temple Mount kind of goes to a corner. I think I have a better picture coming up here. I'll talk about that later. Oh, no, you can see it here. Okay, so the Temple Mount is over here. Dome of the Rock is there. This is another Islamic building, Muslim building here. I don't remember what it was, but it's a worship center of some sort. And so this is the wall that goes across on this side. And it goes along here, and along here, and the city wall goes along here and along here and over here. And so that's the old city wall restored in places because the Romans tore down big parts of that.
So
Romans,
all of that is the Jerusalem area.
yeah, that's the old, what they call the old Jerusalem area. Yeah. Now, just past this road here is where the city of David begins to start. And the city of David quickly descends in height down to a valley. And so I think I have a better picture of that coming up here. This is the Kidron Valley. If that name is in New Testament. And so there's now a road across the Kidron Valley, but there wouldn't have been then. And so this is a real low point here. And these things up here are all tombs. People have been burying people. Now these are all Jewish tombs. Okay, see these over here? Those are all Muslim tombs. See this building here? I have a better picture. Let me go to that picture. More of the Kidron Valley wall. Okay, more of the wall. Okay, here we are. So these are grave sites for Muslims. And see this, what looked to be an arch and everything, but now it's all closed off. Jerusalem was controlled by Muslims for a while and Christians for a while, and that went back and forth a few times. And the Jews never really had any control over it once they were kicked out. But what happened is the Muslims knew that this is the beautiful gate or the golden gate referred to in the Bible. And they knew that that's where the Messiah was going to come through, the Jews were expecting. Okay, so they walled it up and said, nobody's coming through here. And then they blocked up the whole thing with bricks. And to defile the whole area, they put their dead here. So they were really making a point. But they really missed the point because the Messiah did go through there, but long before Muslims even existed. Olive trees. Olive trees don't look like I would have thought a tree would look like. They're kind of strange looking trees. And this is the Garden of Gethsemane down at the bottom of the Mount of Olives where there still are olive trees. And there's a garden that people are tending and keeping going there. And it's quite a nice place.
So that big, is that part of the olive tree, that huge?
That huge trunk-like thing? Yeah. Yeah, they're just odd-looking trees.
I thought of them as more like grapes, where people would have them all little lines and things like that.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, they're really a tree, not a bush. And some of these are very old too. I don't know they really would have gone back to Jesus' time, but they do live a long time, we were told. Okay, the wall of the city, and actually the wall, which is the Temple Mount as well, and some kind of tower there. There were towers in Jesus' time too. If you remember, there's a story that Jesus' disciples bring to him about a tower that was under construction and it collapsed while under construction and killed some people. And they were asking him, what about these people? What happens with these Jews who were killed in this? And Jesus answers them on that. Dome of the Rock peeking up above the wall. And some of these walls are still very strong. They would keep out modern forces except for airplanes. They were very solid, very thick walls made out of quality rock. Dome of the Rock Mosque again. I took a lot of pictures of it.
Who's using the Muslims or
the Temple Mount?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's actually just been changing a little bit. When we were there, it was a Muslim-controlled area entirely, and they set the rules on it. And they carried the guns, and nobody else carried the guns, and that's literal. And the rule was, if Jews came up there, they could not pray, and if they were caught praying, they would be shot. And that's the state of affairs between Jews and Muslims. And so when we were there was a very strict code of dress for that, and all the women were told, make sure your arms are covered right down to the wrist. And you'll see a picture of Melody later on, and she's covered right down to the wrist. But there were some people on our tour who said, I don't care. And so they went up there with short sleeves, little blousy things, and they said, no, go back. You can't come in here like that. the arrogance of that just boggles me. But anyway, most of the people took the advice that we were given and had no trouble getting up there and walking around. But a few were rejected because wearing short shorts and things like that. But that's changing, as I said. The state of Israel is taking more and more control of the Temple Mount. The Islamic people don't like that at all. But it is a Jewish country. They should be able to do what they do. And so it's kind of being phased in pretty slowly. That is part of the wall that we saw. And this is how slits were cut in it. If you're familiar with how battle was done back then, you would cut a slit in a wall like that. That was kind of angled and it had just a little, like a 2-inch or 3-inch slit in it. And you would fire your bow out through this slit. So the angle there would give you an opportunity to angle your bow and point it that way. And lots of up and down so you could go far or near. And that's what you would fire out. And so anybody firing back at you would just hit the rocks that you were shooting out between. And you would have the advantage of being able to stand there and fire arrows on them. So that's how battle was done.
And like with the significance of the Temple Mount it has to do with that is keeping Israel from sacrificing, right?
Oh yeah,
You know, because we were talking about that before, and I think they want to go back to sacrifice, and they can, and that's the reason why we have all these feasts that are even kept here. But nobody can actually sacrifice because they have to go over there to do that.
Yeah.
They can't just do that wherever they want.
Yeah, there's not going to be anybody allowed to do any sacrificing on there for some time. But that does happen. The Bible says that will restart. Sacrifices on the Temple Mount will start up again. Okay, this is an area where we had another one of our meetings. It's just outside of the wall that goes beside the Temple Mount. It's a really kind of nice area of seating and stuff like that. And we had it's beautiful, lots of trees and very scenic. And we had a good time there worshiping. This is right alongside of the wall. This is the other side. You saw mostly the eastern side. This is the western side of the wall. And some of this is original. This is original stone along here. And what happened here, they say, is that when the Romans were destroying this, they pushed something over the edge that was really a big heavy stone, and it came down and crushed the sidewalk and left it like this. So what happened, I mentioned before that Jesus said this would all be knocked one stone off of another. And you can see that in the stones. You probably don't have the resolution to see that real well here, but you can see right at the bottom, there are the original stones, and the style of them changes up here and becomes different as you go up. And so these are original Herodian stones, the ones that Herod caused to be built when he built that. That's Herod the Great. And they showed us the cornerstone of that complex, and it's a huge chunk of stone. And it was the reference point for buildings. That's how they did buildings then. And so you can see the changes in the stones. So the stones were ripped down to literally down to these first 4 courses in this area, different in different places. And you can see that again here too. This demarcation line here is where the Herodian stones end, and then they change up here. And this was built probably by Muslims, or maybe a mix of Christian and Muslims over time as they fought over that territory.
But they're so huge. How do they get it on top of the other one?
It's a good question, but they did that. They built all these big stone buildings at that time. Okay, so getting up onto the Temple Mount, where you saw that big indent in the ground. I'm going very late here. Is that going to be all right?
I was wondering how if you have a lot more to go, you may as well just finish it. And
where am I here? 111. Yeah, I'm about 2/3 through.
Yeah, I think it's because of the format that you're using right now. I think it will a bit of problematical for you to continue it next week. So I would just say, just go ahead, and even if I skip it today, it's not a big deal, because
okay. All right,
I've done that
we'll do
already a couple of weeks already anyway.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's more significant. It's been very entertaining for us, you know. I'm sure anybody else that's watching it would be.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll keep on going. Okay. So this is still looking at the western side, you can see the Dome of the Rock Mosque up there again. And this is how you get up there nowadays. Right where that indent was, where the big thing had been dropped on the road, is where there used to be a beautiful staircase, a winding staircase that took you up there, but it was destroyed by the Romans. And so the way that Christians and Jews get up to there is through this wooden structure that they built. And so you go along here and up here and around, and it takes you up to the entranceway. And that's where there's Muslims sitting up there making sure you're wearing the right clothing. So that's where that's done today. But for Muslims on the other side, Jerusalem is built into 4 quarters. There's the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, the Armenian quarter, and the Muslim quarter. And so each of those quarters is culturally distinct. And from the Muslim quarter, which is on the northern side, you can actually just walk onto the Temple Mount. It's at ground level for them. But us, we have this huge wall and need this thing to let us get up to the top of it. And culturally distinct is really very noticeable. As you go from one of those to the other, it's a shocking difference. When you go over to the Muslim side, it's like you died and you went to hell. It's a horrid place to be. It's poverty-stricken. It's not built up well. But when you're on the Jewish and Christian sides, it's all very modern and nice, and you'll see some pictures of people selling their wares. Okay.
Seems to me that I don't quite understand why would Muslims want to be a part of that, you know? Why would they want any part of anything that is Jewish, that is very, very traditionally Jewish? You would think that either they would want to get rid of it or just want to avoid it completely.
Yeah, well, you'd think so, except for that Dome of the Rock Mosque, and that really is the fighting point here. The Muslims have decided that that is one of their most holiest sites. And they claim that that's where Muhammad hopped on a winged horse or something like that and flew off and was taken away. And so it's a very important site for us. So that's why they're involved there, is that Dome of the Rock Mosque is not just a pretty building.
It's also, isn't it, from their point of view, hey, this is Palestine. We won. We won. We won the battle. This is now Muslim territory forever. Then was 1947, 1948. You know, they just carved out and said, well, this is now Israel. This is now for Jews. And I think at that point, they're saying, wait a minute. And so they don't want to get that out.
No, they don't.
And wasn't it like the next day after Israel was formed, some countries launched a war on them the next day?
Yeah. Well, and we were warned about one thing that is culturally distinctive as well, is that on top of the Temple Mount, you will be approached by young kids asking for money. And they said, don't give them any money. And the reason is they are Muslim children who are in there begging to get money, and their parents hate them doing that, but they do it to get money because they know they can get money from tourists. And so the kids find this to be an easy way to get money. But we were actually approached by a couple kids asking for money with their hands out like that. And their mother jumped on them and said, no, because it makes them look bad if they are the beggars on the Temple Mount.
Why don't they want to be modern? Why don't any why do so few Muslim countries want to be? You can say like Egypt and stuff, but why do so few Muslim countries want to be modern? I don't know. That's a discussion for another day. I don't know.
Well, I think it's about tradition.
A lot of it.
And about culture, and they don't want to give that up, you know.
Yeah.
But Jews keep their culture and they're modern.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense to why they like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, so this is in the background here. Where's my pointer? There it is. The Wailing Wall. I'm sure you've all heard of that. That's the Western Wall. And so down here, just on this other side of this barricade, there are lots of people in there doing this kind of praying and stuff. I did not feel comfortable going in there, and so I didn't. I just stayed out here and took pictures.
Is that the wall where they put little notes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah, that's the one.
I think you're saying it in a different way.
Oh.
Where everybody gathers to pray and.
Yeah, well, and it's more of a lament than a prayer. It's regret about the fact that they can't go up on top of the Temple Mount and worship and rebuild the buildings that were up there, and so it's all associated with a great sadness.
So why do they do that? Why do they?
That's just, that praying style is just kind of part of Judaism. I don't know how it came to be, but it's just what they do.
Well, I know there's some biblical verses that mention that they bow down, that they would bow down. But I don't know if they did that all the time, or was it a special occasion or whatever, you know. I know Abraham would bow down, and different people like that. So
Yeah. Yeah,
they just kept that.
and they've taken some things in the Bible and twisted them a little bit. We're going to run into one of them here if I remember to mention it. So anyway, Western Wall, Wailing Wall, some of the streets along that area we wandered around for a while. And
Super Jew.
Now, listen,
of course, there had to be stuff for sale, right?
Okay, that's too funny.
And you know what we bought there?
What?
We bought a San Antonio shirt.
I can be sure that it said.
And the word in San Antonio was written in Hebrew, and we said, we got to own this. And then we gave it to a friend. So yeah, lots of wares being sold in there. This was actually in the Christian quarter that we were in, but you can, on the Jewish quarter, they have lots of stuff for sale too.
Yeah, I heard the producer of Superman was a Jewish.
Oh yeah?
The one who invented Superman.
Okay.
A lot of people very famous.
I don't think you'd see a Super Jew T-shirt in the Muslim quarter.
That seems sensible.
And
Yeah.
he did a lot of the super characters, but I'm not sure if he did. Superman though.
Now this is a replica as best they can of what the menorah looked like inside of that. Now, because of the angle I'm shooting at, it looks a little bigger than it is. This would be about between 4 and 5 feet tall. Yeah, so it's not as big as a house. The Bible describes pretty clearly a lot of how it's built, but there's still a lot of details left out. And some of the details that they got came from a Roman archway, the Archway of Titus, it's called, in Rome. And on that, they have carved into that wall the parade that was given when Israel was defeated and when the Romans sacked Israel and Jerusalem, and they sacked the temple, and they took this menorah out of it. And there's a carving on that Titus archway of this menorah as being one of the things that they captured in Israel and brought back to Rome. So we know for sure that it was in the temple at that time and it was taken to Rome, but nobody knows where it went to from there for sure. There's lots of different stories, but no confirmation of any of those. This is a remembrance museum for all of the people who were killed in World War II, all the Jews who were killed in World War II. And it's got all sorts of displays in there that are really quite stunning. One of them is a collection of all of the shoes that the soldiers had collected from the people that they were killing. They would, yeah, nasty bits like that. And so it's just a pile of shoes and the people kind of stripped down before they were being killed. And so they have watches and shoes, collections of all those bits and pieces that were taken from them before they were executed.
They're they're cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all those kind of, that history of all of that time, this is also a record keeping center. They keep very close records of everyone that they can who was involved in that. Not just the ones who died, but also the ones who are known to have helped the Jews. There's a special section for, they have a word for it, people who helped the Jews and helped them escape.
Like Schindler?
Like Schindler, yeah. And so we went in there, and that was quite interesting. But here's what I was going to mention. In the Bible, Paul talks about hair length, and I've been kind of thinking I might touch that subject sometime in the future. And for men, he says it's a disgrace for a man to wear a covering on his head. And when we went in there, that's what Jews do, is they always wear a covering on their head now. And so we were required, Melody wasn't, I was required to wear this little paper cap all the time that I was in there. And as other people were from Americans who don't wear hats at all. And so that's kind of a distortion of what Paul was teaching.
Also says that men should not have long hair. Should be.
Yes, it's all part of that same idea.
He wasn't that far after Jesus, so all the depictions we have of Jesus are of him with long hair. So what was Paul, had it changed, had the custom changed that much just in a 50 years, or, I mean, so I don't understand why Paul is saying that. It's a disgrace for men to have long hair when we think Jesus had long hair, and he was only speaking not that long after Jesus died, so I don't understand.
Well, yeah, lots of people have wrestled with that. We don't have photographs of that time, so we don't know what they had for hairstyles.
But it was in one part of the Nazarite, they said that you should not have that hair.
There was a Nazarite vow. That was a short-term thing, normally just a couple months. Yeah, so that's really something different.
So it might be that Jesus had short hair.
Yes, short-term hair.
Right?
Yeah, not girly long hair. And remember, Paul, maybe we'll get to this when we touch that topic, doesn't say how long is too long. He just says long, and he really means long like a woman hair is long. So how long was it? We don't know.
Okay, just for the record, Jerry Siegel wrote Superman, and he was from a Jewish family. And his family were immigrants from
Lithuania.
Because they were being, anti-Semites over there. So they moved to the U.S. in 1900. But yeah, he was.
But of course, there's no way he could have given Superman's real name as a Jewish name.
No.
That's why it's Clark Kent.
Stuff growing on trees. Okay, now this is interesting. You'll find this very interesting. We went to one place for communion, and it is, I don't remember the name of it, but it was a really nice place. And it is the site where a lot of people believe this is the Garden Tomb. Well, that was the name of the place, the Garden Tomb. And they believe it is where Jesus was buried. And they have some good historical reason to believe that. And so we went to this place, had a service there with communion. And they said, told us some of the history of the place. It had been a dump yard when it was first found. And there's a bunch of garbage in there. And as they cleared out the garbage, they found this, which is something that looks an awful lot like a skull. And they said, wow, is it possible that the Garden Tomb was really that close to Golgotha where Jesus was executed? Maybe, who knows? But it has a very much of a skull kind of look to it. And even more so, you don't see it as much in the picture here, but when you see it with your own eyes in 3D, it looks even more like that. Now this is that tomb, and you can see that it's been restored a little bit, but it is a walk-in kind of tomb. It's that tall, has a little bit of a window for light. Inside there are 3 beds that could be used, and it's quite large. Obviously, for 3 people, it had to be.
Is that where they think was Jesus?
Yeah, not everybody thinks that. The Roman Catholics came in and designated a whole bunch of places. They said, well, this is the official Peter's house right here. And they didn't have any proof for that, but they said, this house is what we're going to call Peter's house. And they've built a great big thing around that. And so there were a lot of places where the Catholics, who were kind of the first ones to get there and mark out places, decided where things were based on too little evidence. And this is not one of those. This is one that was found later, and they said that the location seems to be right from the details that we do have.
When you say beds inside the tomb, are they stone? Or?
Yeah, stone beds, yeah. Olive tree again. They are an odd looking tree. Our hotel. Okay, that's just a hotel. Yeah, it's a nice hotel. Oh, I'll tell you about this. Strange hotel. It looks like it has 3 floors, right? You go in and it looks like it has 3 floors, except that it is a 12-floor hotel because it goes down the side of a hill. It's built into the side of a hill and it goes down from there. And so their conference rooms and stuff and dining rooms are all down there. And it's like 12 floors of glass on there. And it's a very neat place. But it really makes effective use of the hilly country that they're built in. The Dan Jerusalem is the name of that place. This is the road heading out to a bunch of things. The Dead Sea Scrolls, that area. And you can see it's pretty barren in this area. It becomes really hot and deserty as you cross over from Jerusalem going east. Somebody's starting to grow something. Now, this is typical of that area. There is a lot of stuff like this, which seems to be just kind of layers and layers of limestone. That's pretty much what it is. But it forms natural cracks and crevices in it. And so if somebody wants to have a little cave to shelter in, they can shelter in that. Or if they want to make it into something bigger, they can just do a little carving around there. They've already got to start from what nature has created. And so they do that. And that's how the Dead Sea Scrolls were kept. They were in little crevices like that people had opened up and widened, and they were storing the scrolls in there. And then they would kind of cover it up with some brick and then mortar over it with some of the natural rock, and you wouldn't be able to see it. And so the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, if you remember the story, of a young shepherd boy in that area. And he had a sling and a stone, and he threw it at a hole in the rock. And he heard something break inside because he got it through the hole in the rock. And so he went and said, oh, look, these are some storage for something that might be important. And he went and told people who knew that stuff. And that's how the Dead Sea Scrolls, the first set of them were found. But a whole bunch more were found in other places just like that in that area, basically little natural caverns that have been expanded out, and they are now filled with jars that contain scrolls.
Yeah, and I had recently read that they found some more scrolls that were even older than those, but they were still pretty much in line with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, they are. There wasn't anything shocking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. The only thing that's really of interest there is some of the scrolls were written by the people who were Essenes and about their views of society and everything. And the Essenes are kind of interesting. In a little bit of a way, they were kind of Christian-like. They were very messianic in their nature. They were very focused on the coming Messiah, and they believed he was coming imminently. They were quite convinced of that from their studies from the Bible. And they were also very apocalyptic. They were also looking for the end of the world. That was their focus. And that is pretty much a Christian thing. They weren't Christians, they were Jews, of course. But they hated the Jews who lived in Jerusalem. They didn't care at all for the Sadducees or Pharisees. They thought that they were all hypocrites living false lives, not the lives they were supposed to be living. And so they lived out in these sects, and they were copy artists. That's what they did for a living, is they would take a scroll in and make copies of it for people who wanted to have a scroll copied. And they kind of lived that way doing that. Also being dry, good territory for scrolls, because moisture obviously would rot a scroll pretty quickly. So you wouldn't have to be so careful with the papers and stuff. This is part of the buildings that the Essenes lived in down there being restored. And so that gives you kind of a idea of how big it is. And so just naturally, there are lots of holes and stuff that the ground produces, and you can widen them out to do things with for storage and whatever you want. Okay, now this is Masada, which is in that same area. If you remember what Masada is, it is, who knows? Just a.
Well, I do, because
yeah, you would.
that's where a whole group of Jews went up that mountain, and it was like their last stand.
Yeah.
And the Romans were intent to kill them, and but when they finally got to the top, they were all dead.
Yep.
Because they refused to be killed by them and give them that glory or honor, so they killed themselves. I don't know how they killed themselves. Maybe they poisoned themselves.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'll show you all the facts on that in just a moment here. But you're exactly right. And so what happened was AD 70, the siege begins on Jerusalem, and a couple of years later, Jerusalem is conquered. And some people fled Israel up to the top of Masada. And Masada was a place that King Herod had built for himself. It's a big palatial place up there. Had lots of room to store animals and food and water and all of that sort of stuff. And we'll see the pictures of that. And so it was a palace that he had created in case things ever went wrong in Jerusalem for himself, and he needed to go up there and run away from people and be safe. And so Masada is really a flat-topped hill, and he built on top of that. And so, as you're saying, once Jerusalem fell, a remnant of the Jews headed up there for protection. and they were determined to just wait and let the Romans die trying to get up there. But the Romans were much more ingenuous than that.
Yeah, they built a ramp, they said. Right?
Do you see
I don't
it?
know if you've got a picture of that.
I do. Wouldn't miss that. and so this right now, you don't have to go up there the way that they did. They had a stairway cut into it, and you would have to walk a large distance to get up to the top there. Now there's a tram that will take you up to the top. And so, of course, we did that. So this is looking down from the tram. Here's where the tram took off from, and it goes up to the top of it. And again, storage for things, storage for grain, storage for water, all of that was up there. This is a model of that land area. And so you can see it is a flat, a pretty flat area here. And then it has very steep walls all around it. And so it was a really difficult thing to attack if you were an attacking army. And that's why Herod the Great built up there. This is one of the rooms that had some of its original paint on the inside walls. So that's what it really looked like. And they had very nicely decorated walls because Herod had the money for that. The average person wouldn't have had that kind of money. But you can see that it was a pretty place.
So is that the actual place or?
Yeah, this is one of the, this is restoring a wall, but enough of the wall was remaining with the original paint on it for this. And so you're seeing original paint on an original wall, and the white stuff is what they've added to restore.
Yeah, but the Jews didn't build that. You said the Romans did.
Well, Herod the Great did, and he was, yeah, he was a Roman-like, but he was still essentially Jewish, or he considered himself to be that.
Well, they call him a king,
Mhm.
but I don't think he was officially a king, which is ironic because the Romans didn't like anybody to be as equal to Caesar. You know.
Yeah, he had a title like a governor or something like that.
Yeah, but in the Bible, I noticed in the book of Acts, they refer to him as King Herod.
Yeah, they do. Okay, so this is a model also of what Herod had built. So I believe that this was a pool here for bathing, some quarters up here, more quarters down here, built into this Masada complex, and just the top of it. The whole complex is down here as well for part of that hill. And so this is the ramp you're talking about, but this has had 2,000 years of wear on what the Romans built. And so what the Romans built was even bigger, especially in the midsection, they said, and went further down the valley down to here. So they built up this huge, huge ramp, and they pushed all their wooden war machines up there. And once they finally got the ramp built and pushed the machines up there, the normal way of fighting was that they had big logs on chains, and they would swing the log back and then wham it into the wall. And they would just keep on doing that until the wall crumbled. And they did that, and when the wall crumbled, it was late in the day, and the commander said, well, why don't we just pick this up in the morning and we'll slaughter them then, and we'll come back when it's a nice part, we've got more daylight to work in. And so they went down and had dinner and came up the next day, and like you said, found all the Jews and killed themselves, because they didn't want to be taken captive to the Romans. So that's how Masada ended.
Yeah, they want to give them satisfaction of being killed, you know,
Yeah.
which makes me wonder because a lot of times the very people are judgmental of people that have killed themselves, but I wonder if that's an exception situation there or what, you know, because
Yeah.
you know, it's like a Pandora's box when you open that, but and I just kind of wonder because they were very faithful. They were determined not to ever be enslaved by the Romans.
Yeah, some were faithful, but some were also in weird sects, and they had some odd ideas. We know a little bit about Pharisees and Sadducees and some of their weird ideas too. So this may have been more of a death cult group.
Could be.
Who knows? So anyway, that's another view of that ramp. You can walk up part of it if you're inclined to bake in the sun that long. This is, again, on the road. Okay, this is the beginning of the Dead Sea. You can see some buildings built up here. Those are going to lead to the Dead Sea. I don't think I have any Dead Sea pictures. Oh, just this one, which it doesn't look like the Dead Sea. I'll explain that in a moment. But the Dead Sea is something you need to see, an experience. You need to get your toes in there. It is.
They healing?
Pardon?
I heard they have the healing.
Oh, they claim that, yes.
It was all salty.
Yeah, there are Dead Sea muds and stuff you can get for face and all sorts of stuff that people claim magical powers for. Beauty products, yes.
I heard that it's so salty that if you drove in there, you would float.
Yes.
You wouldn't sink.
Yeah, we went in there. The nicest thing to do is you have to go and experience that. It is so salty that you float very near the top. If you've ever floated in the ocean, you're a little higher there than you would be in a swimming pool, which is fresh water.
You don't know how to swim.
Well, yeah, what you wouldn't ever want to do is go face down in it because it is so salty. They said that it will start to peel your face. So you don't do that. and so it is brackishly salty and not an enjoyable swim. It's just an experience you need to experience. But another thing that's kind of weird and unexpected was the bottom of it is very mucky. It's kind of a salt water mixed with mud stuff, and it never seems to harden. It's always just mucky, and that gives kind of a creepy feel to it. But it's definitely an experience. If you're there, you have to go and experience and do just to see it. And there's a shower right there, so you can shower off afterwards because that's essential. Okay, now what this is this is where they believe Elijah went to when he was escaping from the king who was trying to kill him. Remember, there's a period of time when he ran off there and crows were bringing him food and he was living in there on the water there. And so this stream of water is something you wouldn't expect for this hilly country. But there's lots of mentions in the Bible of springs just popping out of rocks. And so that's what we have here is a huge rock, and somewhere in there's a river flowing and water comes out of it. And that's just part of the way that rocky territory works. Looks like Sea of Galilee. I don't know why we're there. Oh, critters. Can't avoid a picture of critters. Oh, this was in one of the cities. I don't remember which one this was. But this is where we encountered our first Muslims. And they try to be obnoxious to people, especially when they think there's a bus full of Christians. And so our buses had all stopped. And these guys came up and they thought that they had found some of our tracts, our Bible tracts. And they started ripping them up in front of us and making a big show of doing that and throwing them in the garbage and stepping on them on the ground and all a big show. And as far as we knew, we didn't have any tracts there, so I don't know where they got them from. But a lot of them just have that very negative attitude there. Despite having all the blessings of living in Israel, they still show as much hate as they can.
It'll be judging.
Yeah. Now this is on the Temple Mount finally. This is that one building I mentioned that it's Muslim, but I don't know what its purpose really is. It's a religious center of some sort. There's a lot of trees up there. I was surprised by that. I expected just a flat layer of rock, but a lot of trees have been grown there. Now, of course, this was all torn down and rebuilt, so I don't know how it was when Jesus was actually there. But and you can see in the back the dome of a rock hiding back there. This is a point where somebody believes is the peak of Mount Moriah, which is the mountain that it's built on. Nobody's really sure if that's correct or not because nobody has been able to go down there and have a look. The mosque, that's not really, I've been coming up with the mosque. Okay.
The same one? Oh, the same one? There's two pictures?
Close. One's closer, I think, than the other one. So yeah, and I mentioned these archways that they had found the original stones for the archways, so they put them back up, but they really didn't know where they went because they had to restore so much of this, and so that's kind of an archway without a real purpose. Another archway as well. Okay, there's Melody with the shirt down to her wrists.
Both have hats.
Yeah, we did. That was just because of the sun, though. The Dome of the Rock Mosque is interesting. Inside of it, we were told we couldn't have gone in there and lived. Inside of it, on each of those 12 walls, it's a 12-sided building, there is a theological statement. And most of them are anti-Christian and some of them are anti-Jewish. And so they always say things like, Jesus was just a prophet, and they make a whole bunch of statements like that. And They believe that their mosque is built on the peak of Mount Moriah, but that other building is up there that they think it's over there. So it's a pretty building though.
Do they charge to get in there?
Oh, you can't go in there. It is, if you're a Muslim, you can go in there anytime you want to. I don't know if there's a charge to go in there.
Yeah, because it's a Muslim
Yeah,
only.
it's Muslim only. And so you'd be able to go in there. Interesting thing about Arabic to me. Oh, didn't mean to do that.
Oops.
Okay. This is Arabic writing. And to me, it always looked like knives and daggers. And despite the fact that it comes from the same language as Judaism, it just has a completely different look to it.
They're angry when they do that.
Here's the dome again. You can see this little door here. Remember the pictures I had from, that was where that service door was that we saw, and the other pictures from Mount of Olives. More of the Temple Mount. Very ornate and colorful.
They didn't tell you what kind of stone it was?
If they did, I've forgotten. Yeah, this has nothing to do with this. It's just another building. This is going to be some sort of Orthodox Christian. I don't know which. Could be Russian Orthodox, could be Greek Orthodox. What do you notice about this McDonald's in this terrible picture?
Besides
Oh, it's just kosher.
It's kosher. And in case you didn't speak English, it says kosher over here too.
I don't think everybody understands that, but when you're kosher, it isn't just like, okay, you only eat lamb or beef or chicken. It's more the way that you cook and prepare things and what kind of, what kind of pans and things, dishes you use.
Mhm.
Because if it ever had anything that was not kosher, then you can't say it's kosher.
Right. Yeah, there's a whole pile of rules about that.
A friend of mine that I used to work with, he was very Jewish, and he had a candy bars that he would buy, and they always had to have a little circle and a K in the center. And so we would say, look, it's kosher. Says, yeah, okay, whatever.
Now this McDonald's was at the airport, and this was our trip out. So this is the last slide here. But I'll say one more thing about the airport experience. We were traveling under, I have 2 passports and Melody has a Canadian passport. And at that time, Obama had been bad-mouthing Israel and saying a lot of bad things about them and not going along with them, not helping them with what they wanted. And what we discovered is that anybody but Americans were treated better at the airport. And so I pulled out my Canadian passport and said, Canadian, and they said, front of the line for you. And so we got through before the rest of our tour group did.
People don't understand that, and a lot of Americans don't, and I think mostly white America doesn't understand that. Your passport and who is in charge of the country at that point determines the outcome of how you're treated around the world.
Yeah.
They're like totally oblivious, like everything's fine, no. They don't realize what that means across the board for all the Americans that have to travel, or if you want to travel, that's something else, but if you have to travel, or if you would ever, have to go.
Yeah.
They don't realize that. They're so.
Yeah, Americans are especially known for being oblivious to what's going on. All right, so that's the end of it. It went a lot longer than I thought, but I knew it was going to be long.
Was that in the airport?
Yeah, that's the airport, McDonald's. Yeah.
Kind of makes me wonder, like, you were talking about the jet lag and how you felt like so out of it and stuff. I wonder how the current president dealt with that when he was overseas.
Yeah. Well, yeah, see, if you're there for if you're just there for a short trip, if you're kind of in and out in a day, you don't really feel the effects because your whole dietary system hasn't shifted yet. But in that whole process of adapting, that's when you really start to feel bad because your body is saying, why aren't I being fed? Why are you sleeping now? And all those things that you go through.
Of course, the other seems dizzy anyway, so.
Yeah, see, when you fly over there on a 10-hour flight, at least for me, and I think that's probably true for everybody, is that our flight left at about 10 in the evening. No, maybe a little earlier than that. Maybe it was more like 8:30. And so we kind of spent the whole night flying, and we tried to sleep in our airport airline chairs, but it wasn't a comfortable sleep. And so we started out with having a poor sleep, and then by the time we got there, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the day was mostly over. And so that started everything on a downhill slide for 3 days.
I'm going to close with a word of prayer, and then we're going to also pray for the food. But we also want to remember in prayer some folks that are out and about. The Casino family are on a trip, a vacation of sorts. So we want to remember them in prayer. We also were, or at least I was told that that we had the brother Cortez passed away. So he's passed. We've been praying for him, and I visited with him and all that. We anointed him. But he has passed away. He had an inoperable tumor in his head, and he was suffering a lot. So, but he was a man of God. So we're at peace, with him, and his family is at peace. So we want to remember the family in peace because he has peace, But the family is obviously hurting. I was also told by Isabel that she had an operation of her ankle that she had injured, I think. And she said that she has to go back and have it repaired again because something didn't quite go right. So she wants prayer about that, and also for her daughter, Paula, who's still dealing with some health issues. So she wants us to remember them in prayer. But other than that, we're going to also pray for the food as well. Holy Father, special blessing for all of us that are here today and all the things that we have put before you on your throne. We ask that you'll bless those that lost a loved one, that are hurting, that are suffering. We want to ask that you will deal them with, help them to deal with this hurt of a lost loved one, and for those that are injured and need health issues repaired and taken care of. We want to ask that you will see about them. Special blessing for Brother Abe, who has called upon us to go visit with him as well. We ask that you will also be with him and help him to be able to deal with the problems that he's facing as well. Abide with us now, Lord. Dismiss us in peace, but not from your presence, for we are always here before you. Bless the food that we have brought and prepared to join and share. We ask that you will let it be a blessing unto us, and that you provide the nourishment to sustain us, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually, and that you will forgive us for our sins and cover us with grace. We commit ourselves in prayer and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.